She went to bed with 2 YouTube subscribers. One was her dad, the other was her husband, and when she woke up the next morning, she had 12,000. That is Laura Wilson, known to nearly 800,000 people as Laura Farms, a fifth-generation Nebraska row crop farmer, who built one of the fastest-growing agriculture channels on the internet, without a camera crew, a production budget, or any plan whatsoever to become famous. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why her channel is outpacing almost every other farming creator in the country right now, and what the people trying to copy her keep getting completely wrong. The farming industry has an average operator age that has been climbing for decades. Most young people leave the land. Laura Wilson did the opposite, and the internet has been watching ever since. The backstory behind how she got here, though, is not what most people assume, and the specific moment that set everything in motion was not something she planned, scripted, or even fully understood while it was happening. Laura Carlson, who would later become Laura Wilson after marrying Grant Wilson in December 2020, grew up in Hamilton County in south-central Nebraska. Her family's connection to that land goes back more than a century. Her great-great-grandparents emigrated from Sweden to the United States in 1910 and settled in Nebraska, starting what would become known as Carlson Farms. That operation grew over the following decades into more than 2,000 irrigated acres, covering commercial white corn, yellow corn, soybeans, cover crops, and eventually a cattle herd that her grandfather Kurt expanded in the late 1980s after returning from Vietnam. Farming was not some distant abstraction Laura read about in textbooks. It was the defining feature of every generation of her family going back over 100 years, and she was paying attention from the start. By the time she was 13 years old, Laura had started her own small cow herd. Not a school project, not a summer activity, an actual herd she managed and took responsibility for, years before she ever picked up a phone to film anything. Her path through high school and early college was not a straight line toward the farm. She studied at Southeast Community College in Lincoln, pursuing business administration. She worked as a detasseler, which she has described as genuinely grueling work. She considered becoming an athletic trainer. She thought about the military. She spent a few years working as a nanny and briefly at a school. The thing that kept pulling her back was not a sudden realization or a dramatic pivot. It was more like gravity. By the time her senior year of high school arrived, she already knew she wanted to take over the family operation when the time came. She just did not know the time would come so fast. And here is where the story starts to get complicated in a way that most people covering Laura Farms miss entirely. Because the channel did not begin as a business decision. It did not begin as a content strategy. It began because Laura's cousins in Texas were bored during the COVID-19 lockdowns in the spring of 2020, and she started sending them short clips from inside her tractor cab so they could see what she was doing. That was it. That was the whole plan. A 21-year-old farmer filming herself with an iPhone 8 for a handful of family members who were stuck at home with nothing to do. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. The clips from her tractor cab made their way onto Twitter, where they picked up traction in the agriculture community. And then an account called Ag of the World, which at the time had around 13,000 followers, invited Laura to guest host the account for a week and share her farming life with their audience. She said yes. By the time her week was over, the Ag of the World account had grown from 13,000 followers to more than 27,600. Her personal Twitter account, which she had started for the same casual reasons she started the farm clips, was flooded with direct messages. She later described them as a mix of genuine enthusiasm from people all over the world and, notably, marriage proposals. The tractor cab video that had gone viral on Twitter was something people could not stop sharing. Viewers who had never set foot on a farm were watching a young woman in Nebraska walk them through the interior of a high-tech John Deere, explaining GPS guidance systems, planting sensors, and data monitoring screens from the perspective of someone who was learning the machine herself in real time. One of the most shared comments underneath that video read, "I never knew that there was so much technology in a tractor. I also figured there would be some old grumpy man driving one of those things." That comment captured exactly what Laura had stumbled into, a perception gap between what farming actually looks like in the 21st century and what most non-farming Americans imagined it to be. She was not pretending to be an expert. She was not positioning herself as a brand. She was just showing the truth of what her day looked like, and millions of people had never seen that before. She uploaded that video to YouTube on April 25, 2020, 2 days after creating the channel. She went to bed with 2 subscribers. She woke up with 12,000. She has described that morning as genuinely disorienting, not knowing what to do with the attention or what it meant, but deciding to just keep filming because clearly people were interested. What she did not know was that the specific combination of factors at work in that moment, the lockdowns keeping millions of people home with nothing to do, the almost total absence of young female farming voices on YouTube, the unprecedented access to a world most viewers had never seen, and the complete lack of polish or performance, created a window that may never open in quite the same way again. The channel was built by a set of circumstances that cannot be manufactured, which is a fact that makes what happened next even more interesting to study. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. Because the overnight explosion in subscribers was not what actually built the channel. Any creator will tell you that going viral once means nothing if you cannot hold the audience once they arrive. 12,000 subscribers on day one is a number. What turned that number into something real was what Laura did for the next 5 years. And more specifically, the thing she did that almost no farming creator was doing at the same time. She treated the channel exactly the way she treated the farm. She showed up. She documented the bad days as honestly as the good ones. She filmed equipment breaking down, insurance disputes, mistakes she made, moments where she clearly did not know what she was doing yet. The early videos were shot vertically on an iPhone, with no editing beyond basic cuts in iMovie. She was not trying to make premium content. She was trying to show what farming actually looked like. And what farming actually looks like is messy and physical and unpredictable and exhausting in a way that no other farming content on YouTube was willing to admit at the time. That was the content strategy, even though she would not have called it a content strategy. It was just honesty. And honesty, it turns out, has an extremely high retention rate. She described it to one interviewer as being in a constant state of evolution. Every day on a Nebraska farm is something different. Weather changes the plan. Equipment changes the plan. Prices change the plan. Her audience was not watching a scripted version of farming. They were watching someone figure out farming in real time. And that distinction is the core reason the channel grew the way it did, while other agriculture channels with more experience, better equipment, and longer track records stayed flat. The average viewer age of American farmers has been climbing for years. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's data consistently shows that the average age of farm operators in America is in the mid-50s and climbing. Most young people who grow up in agricultural communities leave for cities. The ones who stay rarely documented in a way that reaches beyond other farmers. Laura was not just a young farmer. She was a young woman in what had historically been a male-dominated corner of YouTube, and she was farming in her own right. Not as someone's wife standing in a field, not as a farmhand, but as the operator who had rented her grandfather's ground, built her own operation, and was making decisions every single day about planting schedules, equipment purchases, and commodity markets. That combination had no equivalent on the platform when she started. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The channel's growth has never been a straight line upward. Laura has faced a sequence of setbacks serious enough to end most farming operations, and the fact that she documented all of them in real time is the specific reason her audience grew rather than shrank during each crisis. A hired worker quit without warning in the middle of one of the year's most demanding seasons. Laura and Grant were left handling responsibilities that had previously been split 3 ways, and her audience watched in real time as they scrambled to keep up. A crop loss triggered an insurance claim, and what followed became one of the most widely discussed chapters of the channel. Laura documented the back and forth with the insurance company over what she felt was an inadequate payout, turning a private financial dispute into a rallying point for thousands of other farmers who recognized exactly the same experience from their own operations. The comment sections on those videos were not what you would expect. They were not just supportive messages from fans. They were detailed responses from farmers across the country, sharing their own insurance battles, their own experiences with adjusters, their own frustration with a system that often seems stacked against independent operators. Laura had accidentally created a forum for an agricultural community that did not have one. Then a bridge on her property collapsed during harvest season, cutting off access to certain fields at the worst possible time. That was followed by a harvest pushed into heavy snow, which damaged crop quality and further compressed margins that were already thin. Each of these events, taken individually, would have been a crisis. Stacked on top of each other across several seasons, they painted a picture of young farming that looked nothing like the aspirational version the internet often celebrates. And because Laura kept filming through all of it, her audience did not drop off. They stayed, they grew, they shared. The community around the channel expanded precisely because the channel was showing something real. Not the Instagram version of farm life, but the operational truth of what it takes to run an agricultural business when you are in your early 20s, with no financial cushion, significant debt on equipment and land, and no guarantee that any given season is going to cover what it costs. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. Among all the things that separate Laura Farms from the farming creators who have stayed smaller, there is one factor that almost no one points to when they analyze the channel's growth, and it is not the content itself. It is the timing of her transition from someone who was learning to farm to someone who was actively building the farm as a business, with the channel funding that transition in real time. Laura and Grant's first years of farming were spent working primarily on land they rented from family, her grandfather's ground, which he had agreed to let her farm when she asked. That arrangement is worth understanding because it gave her access to land without the capital required to buy it. But it also meant the operation was always one relationship or one decision away from changing. The turning point came when Laura and Grant began farming their own acres together for the first time. They bought a tractor together, a significant financial commitment for two people in their early 20s, and began building an operation they owned rather than rented. The channel, by that point generating consistent advertising revenue plus sponsorship income, was what made that purchase possible. The YouTube money was not a bonus on top of the farm, it was part of the farm's financial structure. Laura has been transparent about the fact that 90% of the money that comes in from content creation flows straight back into the agricultural operation, covering equipment payments, seed costs, fuel, land lease fees, and the other infrastructure costs of running a row crop farming business. This is the model that the U.S. Department of Agriculture's own research identified years ago as increasingly common, farmers supplementing farm income with off-farm work in order to stay operational. Laura found a version of that which is sustainable, scalable, and publicly documented. And the thing that makes it different from a farmer who also drives a school bus or works a retail job is that Laura's off-farm income is directly tied to the story of the farm itself. She is not supplementing farming with something unrelated. She is monetizing the documentation of farming, which means the better she documents, the more her farm can afford. It is a feedback loop that very few agricultural creators have managed to build, and most of the ones who tried built the content side first and the farm second, which produces a very different kind of channel. Here's what the comments kept asking. And here's the answer they never got, until now. The question that appears over and over again in Laura's comment sections is some version of the same thing. How does she keep going when it gets this hard? The bridge, the insurance battle, the worker who left, the snow harvest, the thin margins, the weight of carrying a family legacy across 6 generations of land. How does a 24-year-old in Nebraska carry all of that and still upload a video the next week? The answer she has given in interviews and on her own channel is not a motivational speech. It is something quieter than that and more useful. She has said that she treats the farm and the channel the same way, one day at a time, with no expectation that any given day is going to look like the one before it. Her operating motto, which she has shared more than once, is something she and Grant came up with together. Every day is something new, not as a celebration of chaos, but as an honest acknowledgement that farming does not give you the option of expecting consistency. You cannot plan too far ahead on a Nebraska operation because the weather, the markets, and the equipment will not cooperate with the plan. The farmers who last are the ones who can absorb the unexpected without treating it as evidence that something is fundamentally broken. Laura has spoken in interviews about the loss of her grandfather Kurt, who passed away in November 2023. He was not just a family member, he was the person who had rented her the first ground she ever farmed. When she asked if she could lease it, he agreed and gave her one of the nicest quarters on his property. She was clear in her public statement after his passing that she would not be farming without him. That is the kind of detail that does not make it into most coverage of the channel. But it is the detail that explains why the operation is not just a content business. The farm is a continuation of something that started with 2 Swedish immigrants and a couple of John Deere tractors in 1910. The channel is how that story gets told to the people who would otherwise never know it existed. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. In 2026, Laura Farms is in its 7th year. The channel passed 776,000 subscribers and has accumulated more than 207 million total views. In a single recent 30-day period, the channel pulled in nearly 7 million views. She is uploading consistently, covering the full arc of the farming year, from planting season through harvest, along with equipment reviews, collaborations with other farming creators, and her increasingly honest documentation of the financial and operational realities of independent row crop farming in the Midwest. The merchandise operation is running through an established partner. Sponsorships from agriculture-related brands have added an additional income layer to the channel. The Patreon and fan support side of the business is active. The total estimated monthly income from all streams has been reported at somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000, with the significant caveat that Laura has been open about the fact that the majority of that goes directly back into the farm. She has spoken about wanting to reach 1 million subscribers on YouTube, a goal that, given the channel's current growth rate of approximately 16,000 new subscribers per month, appears to be within reach. She has toured farms outside of Nebraska, expanding the channel's scope beyond her own county, while maintaining the operational authenticity that built the audience in the first place. Grant remains an active part of both the farming operation and the content, appearing regularly and working alongside Laura through every season. The platform has also brought unexpected connections. A 9 or 10-year-old girl who wrote Laura a letter saying how much she loved the videos and that she wanted to grow up to be a farmer. Laura has described reading that letter and crying. That moment captures something that the subscriber count and the view metrics do not. The channel is not just growing because the algorithm favors it, or because the niche has no competition, or because Laura happened to go viral at the right moment. It is growing because a significant portion of America, the part that grew up around farms, or has family on farms, or simply wonders where the food in their grocery store comes from, has found something to trust in what she is showing them. In an era of content that is almost relentlessly produced, polished, and optimized, a young woman in Nebraska who still wakes up at 5 in the morning, drives a John Deere, argues with insurance adjusters, and films all of it on whatever camera she has available, turns out to be exactly the kind of content the internet was waiting for. She did not know that when she posted the tractor cab video, she was just sending clips to her cousins in Texas. The distance between that moment and where the channel stands today is not a story about YouTube strategy or personal branding. It is a story about what happens when someone who is genuinely the real thing keeps showing up, season after season, in the snow and the dust and the financial pressure, and just keeps filming. That is what the audience responds to. That is what the algorithm cannot replicate. And that is why Laura Farms is growing faster than most farmers can grow anything. The question now is whether she can carry the weight of the next chapter, the one where the operation she has built on rented ground and borrowed capital becomes something she owns outright, on her own terms, with the audience watching every step. Laura Wilson has never walked away from hard work. The real test is whether the YouTube world keeps watching when the story stops being about struggling and starts being about succeeding. Would you stick around to watch a farmer win, or do you only tune in when it gets hard? Drop your answer in the comments, because this community does not agree on that one.